Hello. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm here again on the stage, and this time it's a huge honor to me to present a person that I admire and I respect a lot what he has done and what he has achieved. Dougherty, he's been a key player launching the maker movement, and he generally is recognized as the father of the maker movement as well. He's the founder and CEO at Maker Media, the chairman at Maker Education Initiative, and he also founded the very popular Make magazine, the one that we pretty much love. Make has been a tremendous catalyst for a worldwide movement known as the Maker movement. And I think this movement is transforming the economies worldwide, and it's transforming our cultures as well. And I have the great opportunity to meet Dale at the New York Maker Fairs, New York World Maker Fair. And if you haven't been in one of the fairs, it's basically a huge playground of ideas and projects. It is absolutely astounding what people is making nowadays. And I could spend hours here, but ladies and gentlemen, with a huge honor, I introduce you, Dale Dougherty. Thank you, Dale.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's nice to be here. I'm glad to see you organizing in your own community to really spread and make the maker movement more accessible to more people. Let me start by asking you, how many of you see yourself as makers? Okay, that's a pretty good number. Now, if you didn't, keep your hands up, please, if you would. Now, I'm going to ask you, if you didn't raise your hand, I want you to find someone that's nearest you and ask them what they make, right? Take it, just talk to yourself. Just ask a few questions. All right. Can I ask a few of you who raised your hands, just, I know you in the green and white yellow sweater. You make a maker space, don't you? And it's a fashion maker space. Yeah. And my point that I want to come back to after I talk is that you already have makers in your community, but you also have people that don't see themselves as makers. And I think if I had enough time, if I could get you outside and talk to those who didn't raise their hand, I would get you to raise your hand. And maybe by the end of the night, do you cook? Do you garden? Do you crochet? Do you do any of those things? And many, many more. You're a maker. This is something human that all of us do. We clutter it up with some technology here and there and 3D printers over there. But it's something we, as kids, are born to do, and we can choose to develop it. And I think the basic idea of the talk today is making is, in our context today, is almost subversive. It's almost dangerous. People tell you not to make stuff, you might hurt yourself. They tell you it's too hard, you can't figure it out. And we become sort of complacent, and we become happy, good consumers. And the subversive nature is we have to not only make things, but we make ourselves. We learn about ourselves through making, and we can change things, we can make things better, we can solve problems maybe in our own lives and then for other people. So that's kind of the gist of, if you don't want to pay attention to the rest, I want to get that across to you. I'm going to show you a short video. How many of you have been to Maker Faire, especially in New York? Well, not enough. So I want to show a short video that gives you an idea of what Maker Faire is like. And I think it sort of does a pretty good job of getting the feeling of it across. Let's see, are we up on sound and all that? Let's try. There we go. That's good. Oh, all right. There we go. All right, there we go. Let's start over. Some of it, but not all of it. That's all right. We at least got that somewhat to work. I missed some of the sound there. But it gives you a sense of what's there. And if nothing else, even without the words, you can see how happy people are there. And I think one of the reasons that I think the maker movement is important is we enjoy it. We love it. We meet lots of people. It does something for everybody that gets involved. And so it is a way to change your world, to make the world better, but also by getting involved yourself, you get to benefit from it. So I use the phrase, the greatest show and tell on earth to promote Maker Faire. And it's something we do in kindergarten, right? But we stopped doing it in high school. We stopped doing it in college. But it's as important as making is, the show and tell, I think, is equally important. To share what you're doing, to tell a story about it, talk about it. Everybody. When I started Maker Faire, I had no idea if any of you would care about what people are doing and the makers who make things. But began to find out that lots of people do. And I think, it's something they don't see on TV. It's something you don't hear every day at school. But I want to, spread this idea that we are producers, not just consumers, that we are creators and shapers and builders. And it's in every one of us, not just a few people. And, we have spread Maker Faire. It's like 192 even this year in 40 countries. There's about 100 Maker Fairs in the U.S., and there's about, the rest are split almost between Asia and Europe, with a little bit in South America. But as Balam said, this tells me that the idea of making is in every culture, and it's foundational. One of our bigger fairs is Maker Faire Rome, and when I first went over there to talk, I remember someone coming up and he says, we don't have the word maker in Italian, but we're makers. That's who we are. They actually now have the word in Italian, and it's a sense of pride, not just personal, but national and culturally. We had a Maker Faire at the White House in 2012. I don't think that'll be happening again. We, I think have gotten recognition of how it inspires kids. You see from the video, you see what's happening. Really, my goal with Maker Faire was to make more makers and get people, when they saw each other, ordinary people just like themselves, young or old, doing it, they'd say that's something I would like to do. And based on my interest, the things that I would like to accomplish. For me, Make started as an idea around a magazine. And in many ways, someone asked me in the audience, Louis, about he grew up reading popular radio electronics, and there was a bunch of magazines. The larger ones were Popular Science and Popular Mechanics. And when I started thinking about this, I went back and looked at them and saw, in many ways, they invited people to do anything, and it was because it was fun. And so when I started the magazine, that was sort of the basic idea. I wanted to do it. I didn't care about business productivity or various other goals for making. I just wanted it to be fun and cool. And when you saw something, it started to stir your imagination. Either you might do a project like we described or one of your own. But I also felt that people had lost sort of the language of making, that they didn't know how to take an idea that was in their head and begin to work on it and develop it, and using tools and materials, and then be able to realize that idea. And that's the fundamental definition I have for making, is to take an idea and iterate on it using tools and materials, and realize that such that you can share it with other people. And it's no longer an idea, it's something. And you can get feedback, and people can talk about that thing. And boy, does it make you feel amazing, right? To have people come up and say, "Is that yours?" They say, "Yeah." "Well, where'd you get the idea for that?" And it goes on and on and on. That's the substance of Maker Faire, really, is those kind of conversations. So I just published this book, Free to Make, and a friend in Barnes & Noble back there is back there. I also want to give a shout out to the nice person back there. Also helped to organize Barnes & Noble Maker Fairs at Barnes & Noble here in Hartford. And it's a great, it was a weekend on November 4th, 5th, 3rd, 4th, something like that. And 650 stores had little versions of Maker Fairs. And I'm really, they're not necessarily like the ones you saw on the screen here, but we do get a lot of people coming in that never heard about this and say, "Well, what is this about?" And they might find books or kits or other people in there. But I did this book because I wanted to share some of the ideas behind the Maker Movement, some of the people behind the Maker Movement. And, as a movement, it really is about the people and what they do and why they do it. And it still fascinates me. Like, why are you a maker? What do you want to do? And you hear the story about it. Like visiting Balam's workshop today. He shows me a mask that was created by, like, how many greats is it? Great-great-great-great-grandfather, who's Mayan, and developed it for, carved it out of wood, and so a ritual dance celebration in the community. But he has that mask. And then he has his art all around him. And he did what we might call more traditional art with painting. But then he began to learn about the tools, like Arduino, and began to figure out what he could do with those tools. And that's why he has such cool interactive art here. And really, I have to say, I'm here because Balam asked me to be here. No, he does such wonderful work, and he brings it to our Maker Faire that I thought, I want to help him in this community spread what's going on, and he does such really beautiful work. And I think when I see things like what Balam's doing, I think, despite some of evidence to the contrary, I feel like we're living in a renaissance. And a renaissance kind of has two meanings. One is sort of rebirth. And it really, in terms of like an Italian Renaissance, meant that there was new information, new ways of learning, new sources of knowledge that caused a flourishing of both arts and sciences, and a kind of mixing things together with a very humanistic point of view. But in some ways, it was also a revival of learning. Of we're not just taking learning the way it's been, but we're reinventing it. And when you reinvent learning, you open up all kinds of possibilities. And so I think particularly here we're seeing hands-on learning as something that the Maker movement is championing. And, the fellow from the Whitney Museum came up and he said, "We've been doing making long before you did." Of course! But it has been forgotten in our society. It's been marginalized. It's been thought as not valuable. We want those kids to get the AP scores really high, and we want them to master all that abstraction and just work on computers. And so this is really running counter to what has been mainstream education. And I have this idea that, learn by doing is not new. It's 100 years old at least. John Dewey kind of framed it. And he was talking about experiential education over subject matter. He said, how do we learn? Not what do we learn? And I think that is sort of a fundamental idea to return to now when we're looking at schools. Not what are they learning? And I kind of see this, kids need to learn this, and we're going to come up with a new subject matter for them to learn. But we're not really understanding how they learn, why they learn, and what keeps them learning. Now, the other side of it is, when you think experientially, kids love learning. It's who they are. We don't have to create artificial constructs and make them learn. They love to use their hands. And partially because it's evidence that their mind is working, that they are thinking and doing things. It's also very personal. This young person was at the Maker Faire, and she didn't probably come as a maker. She was an attendee, a guest, and she had made that, whatever it is, right? Whatever that bowl is doing on her head. But in the backpack, she had dry ice so that she had a vapor trail following her, right? Now, isn't that cool? And don't you just love that, this is hers, and these materials, what are they all worth individually? But she made something really valuable to herself, and it gave her a way to meet and talk to other people. And then, this is another picture from Maker Faire. When you see kids, they are naturally makers. They will climb inside a cardboard box and play without anything more than that. And so, in a sense, when we think of making, how do we continue to foster this? And some people will say to me, there's a lot of making going on in kindergarten, and we should, just keep that going. But actually, in a lot of education, that's been going in the other direction. That we're trying to get kids to do math scores, better reading scores early on. I cite in the book, there's a wonderful book on article in the Atlantic, and it's called the Crazy Illiterate Kindergartners of Finland, and it's kind of this country that has the highest scores in almost everything. And one of their secrets is lots of recess. And they don't actually worry about when kids learn to read. They learn on their own, and when they're ready, they really learn it, instead of us forcing them to do things. So a lot of what I'm trying to convey to you is this is something that's natural, it's human, and we don't often think of technology that way. And to some degree what I've done in bringing this in is the way you learn about technology is pretty natural too. I mean, none of you took courses in how to operate a cell phone, and you probably do a pretty good job with it. Now, things may confuse you, but you didn't have to go to school before you got a cell phone. You probably talked to your friends and said, how do I do this? Or you looked online and said, how do I do that? That's how we all learn today. And of course, making in the past has been the province more of men than women. And I really hope that we're reframing that today. And that, I think in two important ways. One is, obviously, women could do anything they want today, and we should support that. All of us, men and women, and not give them messages like women aren't engineers, or tell, So I was talking to someone last night, and he said her high school counselor, told her when she said she wanted to be an engineer that women aren't engineers. I mean, she's, 40 years old, so it was, recent. It still happens out there. And some degree, social feedback as well is like, well, that won't be interesting for you. Right? So I want everybody to have fun, enjoy, and learn and experiment and discover those things that you really are passionate about. I think one of the magical things about making is you see yourself in the things. If you were making something in school and willing to throw it out at the end of the day, I don't really think that's making. I think it's something you want to take home and share with people because it says something. It means something. And it's not that single sheet of paper with a grade on it that says you got a C. It's something that says, I thought about this. I worked on this. I did this. So I give you kind of three ways of understanding play that I talk about, I talk about in the book. And I think the most important one for all of us, not just kids, is play. I actually had the idea in starting the magazine that this was a magazine about play for adults. That, as you go through life and you have your jobs and you're told what to do and you do it and like the value of things like hobbies is to create a space where you get to make the choices. You get to decide what you want to do. And probably importantly, you immerse yourself in that. And time just seems to fly. Time goes away. You are doing something. And that being in that state of play, as they call it, is really remarkable. It's really something that can transform you. And I think we often don't take enough time to do that. And then what we also realize with not every kid gets to play. Not every kid gets as much time to just goof around and experiment and do silly things, especially if we're trying to push them down the line to getting better test scores. And yet, I think the most important thing that we might value here as a culture, society, that we don't realize, if I was to ask you, where does innovation come from? Is it just innate in some people? Are there certain preconditions, certain things that happen that make you become an innovator? And whether that's an artist or an entrepreneur, I think it's the ability to play, to try things, immerse yourself in something, figure things out, be curious, have wonder. Someone I spoke to just yesterday, he said, the kind of people I look to hire are not only those that have a great sense of wonder about why things are the way they are, but they start to answer that question in some meaningful way themselves. They don't just ask the question and walk away from it. They try to do something, whatever size and shape they can do that. The other is practice. So we think about music, we think about sports. Do you just pick up a musical instrument and you're good at it? I was talking to our friends that played earlier tonight, and music is very complex. And the only way you kind of learn to do it is by, did I lose my graphic artist? The only way you do it is by iterating over it and trying it and getting better at it. And so if we think we want innovative, creative kids, do we really think that exposing them to a 20-minute activity once a week is enough? They need to be in these maker spaces for hours. And they need to be able to do silly things in there just to be able to learn how things work and things, what they need to know and how to do things. This young man, built a smartwatch for kids. And he wants to share that as like a platform so you can learn to program and learn to take something that's obviously a consumer product, but you could make it yourself and actually learn how it works. The other big thing, and I think this is what the maker movement as a movement is really about, is participation. When I was talking to Louis, he said he used to read the magazines and do stuff alone, tinker alone. But today, kids can tinker in a social context. They can learn with each other, and it's really powerful. Because if you want to learn design or you want to understand how to solve a complex problem, we need to work together. We need to see that there are different perspectives and different ways of thinking. And each one of us, if we got in a room and I was to say, what do you know? What could you teach me? And what could I teach you? We'd all come up with different answers. And it'd be really fascinating. And I wish we could do that more in school, is build on the capabilities of kids and what they could even share with each other. But participation, such as Maker Faire, really, I think it means that your work has meaning, that it has a context outside of yourself, and you can share both the process and the product with other people. And out of this practice comes a mindset. And that's what I'm really tried to cover in the book and tried to celebrate, because it's a way of looking at the world that comes from interacting with the world and learning about how the world works and what you can do to change it. Instead of complaining that things aren't the way you want, the onus is on you to start making that change, to learn how things work and figure out a way to push things forward. So the mindset is not something we could teach on its own. It's a bit Zen-like, or yoga, or other things. You have to do making to get the mindset. And the trouble is with a lot of adult things is we want to get right to the mindset and skip the process of doing it, right? And so it's really important, I think, to see that it emerges out of this practice, emerges out of lots of experiences. And what you end up with is a unique person that has a really unique way of looking at the world and looking at themselves and their own abilities. And I like Marshall McLuhan, some of you I hope know, says we shape our tools and our tools shape us. And I think we could think of that really broadly. The work that we do also shapes us. The work that we choose to do ends up choosing us. And it's really fascinating to me how I've seen almost a generation now growing up, interacting through the maker movement, and seeing them grow and develop as people, not just as makers. Because it changes us and it changes the world. And again, almost like religious training and other thinking, like you can't just change the world without looking inside. You have to work on both. And somehow making that creative side of us. You can't be an artist without thinking what it means to create. And I think the same is true for this. And again, here's just one of many examples I could give you. But these are kids that designed and made their own 3D printed prosthetics for themselves. Do you think that changes their worldview? Do you think that the world looks different? Instead of being characterized as disabled, you're super abled. You can do things for yourself. And I think this is, part of the power of, I think, the maker movement. So what I would like to really ask you is to help make more makers. And it's not just the people who make out there. It's the people organizing maker spaces in schools, in communities, at the cult development you're talking about tonight, libraries, all kinds of good places. So you have libraries. Libraries have been the awesome leaders, and we got several. Jennifer back there, right? And the Connecticut, was it Connecticut? Library Consortium. But libraries have been first movers in this. And I'm so proud of that. If I'd go speak at the American Library Association, first time I did, 250, librarians in a room, I thought, oh my God, they're going to beat me up over the makers. And it was, they wanted to do this. They just want to know how. How could we do this faster? And I think to some degree, as a person, one of the qualities of a maker that I really value and see that it's not so obvious in our schools is self-directed making, self-directed learning. And that's why you go to a library. You say, I want to learn something. And you ask the librarian, they don't give you the answer, they point you in a direction to find a resource. And I think that's similar. I want to make something. Well, there's a way to learn how to do this. But I can't make it for you. You have to do that yourself. So I'm coming up on time here. I want to mention, especially given the mayor's thing, I have another book that I co-authored that just came out, and it's also online at makercity.com. And it's talking about how do we apply these things to the city itself. Economic development, education, and honestly, it comes at a time, this is an old cover of Make, but we really need to be thinking about how do we remake America? How do we get more people doing productive work that they value and find meaningful, and that they have a sense of control over what they're doing and why they're doing it? And I know I'm right up on the time, but I want to cheat here on the time. And again, give you a couple stories here, because they didn't get a chance. They were up here. I want to introduce you to Bill Derry, who's a librarian from Westport. You were in Westport and you retired. And so I heard this story and I'm going to repeat it. So Mark Mathias organized the Westport Mini Maker Fair. And the first year he was doing it, he walked into the library and saw Bill there and said, I would like to do a maker fair. Could I get a room at the library? And Bill said, no. You can have the whole library. So it's that kind of community spirit that makes this happen. And that's why there's 190 maker fairs around, because there's people like Mark and Bill that collaborate on doing this. The reason they're maker spaces is Brian and Deborah and other people here trying to work together to do something for other people, because this isn't just benefiting or meant to benefit the people that show up and use the tools. Balam talks about working with the kids and the badges that came from, where's my badge? Right here. From kids having something real to do, something that all of us go home with tonight. So, I think the basic idea of rebuilding America today is really rebuilding community, or building community. Finding ways that more of us touch each other, talk to each other, work together. And I think that's the spirit, anyway, that I see the maker movement and a lot of the great work that you can do and are doing in your city. So thank you very much for having me here, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dale, for coming to this. It's just amazing. Here in Hartford, Dale, don't go anywhere yet. Hartford Denim, you out there somewhere? Hey, can you come on up?
I just mentioned my book's in the back of the Barnes & Noble.
Yes, Dale has his new book. It is for sale at the back of the room at Barnes & Noble, and I believe Dale will sign it for you if you ask him.
Nice to meet you.
Excellent performance. That was really great talk. My name is Marshall Deming.
Wait, not yet. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't go just yet. I have something for you.
Take the stage, sorry.
So I have a clothing factory. I have a maker space in Hartford.
Yes.
6 years going.
that's
And we make
great.
all that stuff back there in our
awesome.
shop on
Yeah.
on antique equipment. And I've got a certificate here for one custom jean.
Oh, really?
And
Gotta get measured.
stamped
Look at that.
stamped maker.
That's great.
I-
Thank you.
We actually found an old vintage stamp that was cast that said maker in our collection of tools, and we stamped it right there.
Great.
But I'll have to get your measurements before you go.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Marshall. I appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Make sure you
All
let
right.
them measure it.
Okay.
We'll ship them out to you.
All right.